Welcome to another episode of The Advocate. Today, we're going to talk about immigration and issues related to immigration reform. We have two guests with us today. We have Mr. Joel Cruz, who works with the Attorney General's office, and we have Ms. Cristina Chavez, who is an attorney in private practice here in Albuquerque. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here today.
Judge Cedillo, thank you very much for inviting us. We're very happy to be here.
Thank you, Judge Cedillo.
Well, so let's get right to the topic. Joel, you and I had been talking about this. We had a few conversations about some issues that arise every time the federal government decides or starts talking about immigration reform. What types of issues have you noticed in the Attorney General's office that seem to occur when this discussion gets raised?
Yes, you know, the latest estimations are that there's 11.7 million undocumented people in the United States. The Pew Center came up with a study that said that most of those come from Mexico and Central America. Obviously, the proximity of the countries has a lot to do with it. Historical events, of course, also have triggered this migration of Mexicans and Central Americans to the U.S. And so those 11.7 people, when they hear any news coming from the White House or the Congress, that there may be something that may benefit them, that's all they want to do. I mean, in fact, a recent, another study showed that those immigrants would prefer, if they have a choice between finding a way to become legal rather than even becoming citizens of this country. So, because not being legal in this country means that you're basically underground, and you're open for a lot of abuse, a lot of discrimination or segregation, and all sorts of problems that you have by not having the legal documentation. So when people hear that, they come out and they are seeking assistance, somebody to help them. And with that, unfortunately, sort of an unintended consequence is that there's scammers, there's people who will use that opportunity to abuse others and make some money out of that desperation. So they begin to offer their services. Some of these people are a little bit, maybe they're urban people, both from Mexico or Latin America. Perhaps they're a little bit more educated than the normal working class population, so they are able to speak Spanish. They're able to, they have sort of the articulation of how to convince people to come to them. So in our office recently we received communications that there's people already offering their immigration consultant services based on what the president may do in the future, which is an extension of the executive order that President Obama has recently done with the deferred action childhood children who came to this country as very young, DACA we call them. So now the president has announced that he's going to extend that. He recently delayed it until the elections. But people are already saying, come to me, for a fee, I'll help you.
And Ms. Chavez, tell us, why is that a problem? Why is it, if somebody would like to assist an undocumented worker here or an undocumented individual here in the United States, why does that present a problem?
It presents a lot of problems because of the fact that kind of a sense in the community is that immigration law is, you can file paperwork, you can complete it, it's just filling out forms. But in all reality, immigration law, it's very complicated. There are a lot of issues that, if not screened properly, can lead to very serious consequences, including removal from this country, being placed in proceedings and being removed from this country, whereas someone may have been eligible for a benefit, they might completely lose their eligibility for that benefit, either temporarily or permanently. In addition to that, immigration services, I mean, there are filing fees that go along with that. Families end up losing filing fees, and a lot of the clients that I see are working class, middle income families who don't have a lot of resources. And so in addition to losing their relief or stalling their relief, they stand to lose economically. They stand to lose when families are separated, also, in the worst cases.
So, Joel, the Attorney General's office has recognized that this might be a problem where there are individuals out there that are offering services. They may not be authorized to offer those types of services. They may not even be aware of the extent or the detail, all the requirements. They're simply just trying to make a buck by saying that they can do certain things. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that recognizing that immigration law is complex and it is not only just a matter of filling out a form. I think that the concept used to be that, just fill out a form and that's it. But as immigration laws have become complicated, I think that our legislature here in New Mexico passed a law saying that even filling out forms, it's already the practice of immigration law. So with that, then you have to set a standard as to who is able to then actually make that offer to the public to be able to offer those services. And the threshold of who can do it is not that hard to a certain extent, but it does require minimum standards. That is, that a certain training of people have to go through, and also they have a sort of a guide as to how long it takes to fill out certain forms or certain procedures so that can be placed in a reasonable cost. So obviously attorneys in New Mexico, and actually attorneys from any other state that are in good standing with their state bar can represent. Our law is very similar to the federal law. So we just basically follow that. The other important group that can do this kind of work is nonprofit entities and people who work in those entities who have gone through the training and who have applied to the Board of Immigration Appeals for a permission or they call it an accreditation, showing the proper training, the knowledge of it, the limitations of their training and what they can do, so that those individuals can be providing those kind of services in a qualitative way and in a reasonably priced way. And that's what the law in New Mexico is right now.
All right, and Ms. Chavez, give some advice to anybody out there that might be watching. If somebody has contacted them, or if they perhaps have come into contact with somebody that is offering these services, what should they do?
If someone is contacted by one of these individuals, I would say to start off with, for one, before anything, I would say seek advice from a qualified individual, be it an attorney or be it a BIA accredited representative, so that you know where you stand. And I always tell people, seek two opinions. If you were not happy with the first opinion, seek a second opinion. That way you know where you stand. A lot of these times when an individual is confronted or goes to one of these individuals, these immigration consultants we could call them, they might be given false promises where they might not even be ultimately eligible for this type of benefit, but where that person is, wanting to make money, they tell the person what they want to hear rather than what they're actually eligible for under the laws. I would say if confronted or if approached or harmed by one of these individuals, and better yet, harmed by one of these individuals, I would say go and report this. File a complaint with the Attorney General's office. And in fact, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, which is one of the agencies that grants benefits, on their very website, they say report immigration scams and have state by state the entities to whom they should file these complaints. I say file these complaints without fear of repercussions against you. And sure enough, if these individuals are doing it to one person, they're doing it to several individuals in the community, and unless we come forward and report these things, they just continue to perpetuate themselves.
And you make an important point there, and I want to address it, and that is that we have to remember that people who are undocumented are fearful of most entities, where to go. I think slowly, little by little, people are beginning to sort of gain that trust. And I've taken it in my office at least. First of all, my boss has told me immigration status of an individual has nothing to do with protecting the consumer's rights because they are consumers. They are trying to buy a service, but if the service is defective, if the service, if they don't have license to do this, or they don't have authority to do this, it's basically an unfair and deceptive practice, and that's how we deal with it. So we tell people, and everywhere we go, or whether it's in the media or presentations, we tell people your immigration status has nothing to do with the fact that you paid $2,000, $3,000 and you did not receive the service that you were contracted for. And we will, this office is a public office. This office is maintained by the taxes of everybody, whether you're legal or not legal in this country. When you go buy gasoline, when you go buy groceries, you don't say, oh, because I don't have any papers, I'm not going to pay any taxes. No, you pay taxes. Everybody pays taxes. So everybody needs to receive the benefit from our governmental entities.
What numbers should they call, Mr. Cruz, in order
Yes.
to make contact with the Attorney General's office if they happen to find themselves in one of these situations?
Yes, we have if you're outside of the Albuquerque area, we have an 800 number, 1-800-658-1508. Our website has all this information too, which is nmag.gov, New Mexico Attorney General.gov. We also have a local number here in Albuquerque, which is 222-9000. We have an office in Santa Fe and another office in Las Cruces of the Attorney General. And for the most part, those cases are referred to me directly, one way or the other, and then I decide how that is going to be done or handled internally.
Now, I've actually seen one of these types of cases come up in front of me in court where someone had apparently hired an individual to prepare some paperwork, some immigration paperwork, and then also divorce proceedings. That individual took the money and then fabricated the documentation and appeared and had promised the person that had come in my court that she had actually received her divorce.
Wow.
When in fact she had not. In fact, all the documents were fabricated. And so it's a pretty serious situation, I think, where somebody not only would commit a crime against that particular individual, but go to the extent of fabricating court documents, which was pretty serious.
In immigration, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Christina, sometimes you have these immigration consultants, whether it's done with the motivation of convincing people to hire them, they make great promises, and people want to hear that and they want to legalize the status, so they fall for that. Or whether they don't know how to fill out the forms, or even if they had great intentions but they don't know what they're doing, or if they're really committing really a crime, they will actually begin to fill those forms to accommodate for what they think the Department of Immigration wants to hear from this particular individual. And that's really bad. I mean, I've seen a case or a form, for example, of a Mexican citizen who applies for political asylum. And in the story of the political asylum application, the consultant was saying that this person feared persecution in Mexico because he belonged to one of the two parties, or one of the three parties in Mexico, which was a complete, made-up story. The problem with that is that when the individual presents this application with the immigration authorities, you basically have been exposed. You're exposed, and you're now in an application that cannot be approved, so you're going to be for sure denied. You've lost all the money of the preparation, the filing fee, and now you're in front of the immigration officials with no defense of any kind, and then you're going to be placed in deportation proceedings. And that is now a very expensive process.
Is there any place, Ms. Chavez, that individuals can go where they would be certain that someone is qualified or certified to help prepare forms or help them through this process?
Definitely. I mean, there are several immigration attorneys here in Albuquerque. I can name more than likely, I think more than 20 immigration attorneys in town, several. And
That's an area
those-
you practice also.
That's correct, and that's exclusively what I practice in. There's the American Immigration Lawyers Association, AILA, where individuals could find attorneys and seek consultation. The New Mexico State Bar runs a lawyer referral service as well, where one could be referred to an attorney. And there are nonprofit organizations as well that serve in our community. I know of at least two nonprofit organizations that for low cost or no cost can serve individuals.
Catholic Charities is one of them. The New Mexico Immigration Law Center on 4th Street is also providing the services. That program is connected to the law school here in New Mexico. Now that's a very important topic too. That is that in our approach to combat this or to make it fair for people, we've taken a three-pronged approach. Number one is events like this. Information dissemination. We want to inform people what the status is of the declaration of the president. We want to know if the law passes. We want to be there. And we're working on this to be proactive with respect to that, to create a program where people could go and they could receive the appropriate information with no other motivation than to give the right information to people. And if people cannot immigrate for whatever reasons, that is the truth, and that's better than being deceived. The second prong is the enforcement, and that is where the Attorney General comes in. Enforce and eliminate all those individuals who are doing this that are not supposed to be doing it. But a third prong that is equally, and I would consider even the most important one, is that since we recognize that there's a need and desperate need for this kind of service, people many times go to these consultants because there's no other place to go. And granted, they get promised and they could be undercharging them a little bit in order to avoid having to go to a lawyer. But I think that in New Mexico, we lacked really the capacity to provide the services that are needed in our community. Now, I have to say that in moments of great need, like in the '86 when the amnesty law passed, lots of churches, for example, religious groups, ecumenically got together and began to put their resources together and provide those services to people to do the proper forms and training and everything else. But then once that is over, then there's no longer there. There's nothing. Catholic Charities is really the one that has been standing there for a while. But in a recent conversation with the director of USIS here in Albuquerque, actually the former director, she came from Seattle. And when she came to New Mexico, she asked her staff, give me the list of everybody here who provides this kind of services. And the answer was 2 or 3. That's it, in the whole state. She said in Seattle, there was like 30 entities providing this kind of service. And so I think that we need to step up. And all of us need to work towards developing the capacity, finding the sources, finding the ways that we can have this kind of service available to people so that if they're available, they don't need to go to underground. Because this is basically what's happening underground. Nobody in New Mexico announcing themselves as providing immigration services because our law in New Mexico is a prohibited law. You cannot do it unless you're authorized. So what they do is that they put fronts, income tax, immigration passport photos, translations, whatever. Those are the fronts. When people come in for those services, then they inquire as to their status, and that's when they bring them to the back office and began the process. This is exactly how I found, I think I'm in my 18th now case of putting a stop to people who are doing this kind of work underground.
And so the Attorney General's office would actually then investigate this. I noticed that the law in New Mexico that was recently passed with regard to these types of issues makes it a crime for someone that actually performs this type of service without being properly certified or properly authorized to perform the service. You've handled 18 cases like that already?
Yes.
And
Now, not all of them have gone to court. There have been no need to go to court for several reasons. People agree with our office to stop. And so they enter a written agreement with us. One of the cases that I brought in court was an individual who agreed to stop, and then a year later, we found that he was continuing to do it. At that point, we decided to take sort of a more stronger action. That particular case was referred for criminal prosecution, and the person was actually convicted.
And Ms. Chavez, have you noticed these types of issues in your practice?
As far as, I'm sorry?
As far as individuals that have gone to these providers that aren't properly authorized to provide that type of service.
I do. I've seen a variety of issues. I've seen from, and Joel mentioned something very important and I think interesting to emphasize as well. He mentioned that someone might have a benevolent intent or not necessarily, trying to, or they don't present themselves as scamming. I see a variety. I do see the immigration consultant where you have the, like you said, the storefront and go to the back room behind the clothes, and sometimes in that kind of a situation. I've also seen situations where it's a friend of the family or a lady in the church doing it for donations. I've seen those issues, and I have in fact referred case, one I can think of off the top of my head to Joel, where there was serious harm done to this individual from a lack of explanation of the process that was required to obtain the benefit, to not providing the documents for the individual to review, copies of documents, to not providing information as to the progress or how long a case would take. And in that situation, I mean, there was ultimately a separation of the family that they endured. So again, returning to very serious consequences that can result. And I mean, fortunately in that case, not all was lost. There was still a way to proceed, but again, at an expense, at time, at separation from the family, emotional suffering by the family. So very high costs in every sense that can result from this. I've seen, you also mentioned falsifying information. I've seen with the deferred action for childhood arrivals, when the DACA, when I think of that situation, I do think of the lady at the church completing these applications at a donation. And again, in that situation, I do remember one in particular, falsification of information, and then ultimately immigration raises a flag and comes back to the individual, and again, information is presented and presented falsely, risk of committing perjury, lots of serious consequences that can result from these acts.
I guess the best advice is to try to get it right the first time. If you're going through this process, and in order to get it right, you need to go to somebody that has the ability, the authority, the right by law to perform these types of services. And that way you're probably best protected. And then if you're one of those individuals out there that are trying to perform these types of services, either get qualified, go through the process of actually receiving the certifications that you need in order to become qualified, or don't do it.
That's right.
And if you do perform those types of services and you're not qualified, then watch out, because it sounds like the Attorney General's office might be looking for you.
That's correct.
And then if there are other agencies or people out there that might be interested in providing this kind of service in the future, because you said that one of the prongs of this approach is to try to recruit, it sounds like,
yes,
individuals or organizations. How would you suggest that they go about doing that, Joel?
Well, it's difficult, it's hard. I'm not going to say that it's very easy, because we need resources, we need an entity that has the capital to be able to hire people. At the same time, though, just like Cristina was mentioned, there are a lot of people with notions of being a volunteer, and that should never be stopped. I truly believe that volunteerism in our society, in our country, is really good. There's a lot of people who are retired lawyers, judges, paralegals, who could easily become part of this where their income or their salaries are no longer the main source of their income to live. So we need to begin to recruit and form, we need somebody to take the lead on that, definitely, to put everything together, a package, so that we can begin to bring people in. The law says that a person, and the definition or the description is a reputable individual of good moral character. Somebody who, the lady at the church who wants to help, who wants to do this. The good intentions are great, but you got to make sure that you know you're connected, you're getting the training.
Where would they go to get the training?
Well, right now we don't have that either. The training, for example, right now, of some of the people in Catholic Charities, is they have to go outside of the state, and that's expensive. But, we have plenty of lawyers already here in town. The American Immigration Lawyers Association could easily create a training program for individuals who are going to be monitored. This is the most important thing. These individuals who are doing business for this, they're not monitored at all. They are able to do it behind the scenes because they won't leave any track sometimes. Sometimes they leave the track when the person courageously asks for a receipt of the money. Mm-hmm. Or they pay with a money order, and you can trace that as to who cashed it. But that's the only trace that you will find in some of these cases. So we need people to be monitored, people helping each other how to, respond to this particular situation of trying to help immigrants in this particular situation. The law says that you don't have to need any certification if you're an individual, if you're a relative, if you are a pastor of a church, if you're a deacon in a church, maybe an uncle who was college educated and feels comfortable filling out the forms. You can do it with certain conditions under the law. You cannot charge, not even a donation, because that's a remuneration exchange. You can't say, cut my grass and I'll help you do the form. That's an exchange. You cannot do that. You have to do it really for no money at all. You have to do it at the request of the individual. You have to have a previous relationship with this individual, and you do it on a one-time basis. So basically it's saying, don't do business out of this. If that individual does this work under these conditions and they make a mistake, there's no consequences to that individual for doing this kind of work. The consequences are only for the immigrant who probably lost this. Now, I have been also an immigration lawyer before. I am not now, but I have practiced immigration law. And I have had this experience. People come to me and they present their case to me. And I ask all the questions that I need to know about the situation. And I know the law, and maybe I need to research a little bit of the law to find out if there's something that I can do or not. And I reach the conclusion that there's nothing that I can do. Or what I can do is very limited. I can file a petition for a green card, an I-130. But since the relationship that is petitioning that is going to take a wait of about 5, 8, 15 years, I'm under the legal obligation and duty to inform my client that that's the reality. I cannot make up the laws. This is what the law is, and I can help you with this, but that's it. Mr. Cruz, how about, can you get me a work authorization, a work permit? No, I cannot. There's no provision for me to get you under your circumstances a work authorization, I'm sorry.
And so I guess the point that you're trying to make is that because you're under the obligations of an attorney, there are certain restrictions that you're obligated to follow. There's certain agencies, certain commissions that have authority over your practice, and as a result of that, there's an overseer. We always know that you're trying to do the right thing because one, you've got the education, the experience to do it, and two, there's an oversight committee.
My license is on the line.
That's right. And so I think the point for individuals out there that might be watching, if you're an immigrant and there is somebody out there that is saying they can fill out paperwork for you and they're going to charge you something, the best thing to do probably would be to contact the Attorney General's office so that you can actually certify or verify whether or not this individual can do that type of work for you. If you're an individual out there who would like to volunteer and help and perhaps assist immigrants in this process, also get a hold of the Attorney General's office, because they can go over the law with you and they can explain to you the requirements of the law. And so that way you know that you're doing it properly also. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Again, thank you for watching, and as always, know your rights, your responsibilities, and God bless.